welcome to another tutorial. Today we're going to create this nice flower with I have prepared some screenshots so you can see what we are trying to create. These are the seeds blowing away in the wind from another camera angle and just a small close-up. Okay, let's get started and create a new file. What we need is a cube. It will be the base of our scene. Make it around 1000. Oh, sorry. It doesn't need to be that thick because it's going to be the ground. Just putting it. And let's make around. We don't need that much, we just need one. And that will be okay. Okay, we will call this ground. Okay, what we need is a particle system at basic setup. It's a good idea to change the color because it's default, and if you want to change something, you make a new one. You have the possibility that it's right over the old one. Okay. Okay, then we need a circle. We need it from the IX, around 13 centimeters. And when you hit play, you can see the particles going straight up. So you have to make sure that it is the right direction. Okay, then we go into the emission tab. We do not need to emit from all frames. We just have to emit from one frame. You see just a few particles going straight up. We don't need that many particles, we just only need one. And with this particle we are going to create the base where the flower will sit on. Hit play again and you can see one particle around here going up, but we don't see anything, we don't see the trunk. So to see the trunk we need a trail, and we're going to include that in our system. Here you can see the trail option. Okay, and you see just a line going straight up. Why is it a gap between? Because it's not long enough. We have to decide how long the trunk must be. So we increase this value around 100. And what we also need to do is to increase our time frame. And then we hit play again. Yep, and then we see our trunk go up. At this moment it doesn't stop, so we have to fix that, and it has no mass, so we have to create that also. To do that we need a sweetener, and we also need a spline shape, and for that we use a circle, and this is of course too big. And then put the circle and the trail in the sweetener. Oh, sorry. And let's put it like this. And then you can see the trunk got some mass. Go to time frame 1, press play, and the trunk is going up. Okay, what can we do else? Because we can see it's not long enough, even though we emitter for about 100 frames. And to change that, we can change the speed of the emitter. Now it's about 150. Let's change it to 110. And let's see what happens now. And you see it becomes a little bit longer indeed. And the other thing that's not working is that it stops moving, and we want to freeze it at the moment it's about the right size. And to do that, we have to make a question. And we know that we want to emit it about 100 frames. So in this question, we say when it's greater than 100 frames. Okay, and then we need an action. And we got one action over here. And to sort everything out, we call this one freeze. And we also have the action freeze. Okay, and what we want to do is that we want to freeze the particles. And you see, it stops. When you look under the emitter, you see with this emitter, this question is fit in. If something doesn't work, you have to check if the right question is under the right emitter. And to make everything clear, we say emitter trunk. Okay. Let's hit play again. Yep, it stops around 100. And because a trunk is not always the same size at the top as at the bottom, we can also change this, and then we have to go into the sweeteners. And we don't need a cap below, but we need a cap at the top. And then we go into the detail section. If you don't see the detail section, you have to press this button and then it will pop up. And we can play a little bit with the scale. You move this down, you'll see what happens. Now the top becomes smaller, and we have to make a base where the seeds will have to stick on. So press Command, and then you have a new dot and another one. And if it's too small, just change it like this, and you can make some better corrections. A new one. Like this. And another one around here. And if you do something wrong, it doesn't matter. Just go back a few frames. And just zoom a little bit in. And if you're happy with the shape, just maybe go like this a little. Yeah, okay, that will be fine for the moment. Okay. Another thing we can do is we can make it bend a little, and for that we need a deformer. And go into the system, choose a modifier. We need a direction. What happens now, that's interesting. You can see here it's group affected, and later on we're going to need another emission, and we have to make sure that the right things bend, so not everything will bend, because if we leave it like this, the whole scene of emitters will bend, and we only want the trunk to bend. So what we can do is go into the emitter, and we can here create and add a group, and you see here particle group 1, and what you can do is of course rename it, and we say particle group as trunk. Okay, and then in direction we want to affect the particle trunk. Whoops, this is of course a little bit too much, but you can see it works. And we have to change the settings, and we can change that with this setting, and just check, and that looks a lot more realistic. Well, you see you can also use this dot to change the values. So if you want to animate, you can also change this one, or it's up to you how much you want it. And if you don't want to use it anymore for a second, just hit that button and the modifier will not be active. Okay, now we have to go to the top of the emitter, and we have to create the seeds of the flower. Okay, we need a new emitter. So you go into the system, or just copy this one, whatever you want. Place it on the emitter tab, and what we need is a sphere. We see it's emitting in all the directions, and we only need it once. Okay, and we need a couple of changes. Speed around 55 and radius about 15. Yeah, that should do it for now. But what we want is that the top is starting to emit when the trunk is finished. And for that we have to make a new action. Just call this mid top, and what we want is to control spawning, direct spawn, and we need to put the emitter, just to make everything clear, we call this emitter top. And just make it around 80. And then what we need to do is, when we have the question about freeze, it also has to freeze, but it also has to do some other thing, and that is to admit the top. Okay, let's try. And then you can see the particles coming from the top. Yep, and it already starts to look like a dandelion. But what we need to do is to have to change this particle into the seed shape. Okay, and one other thing to keep this simple, not too messy, is go to your middle top, and then create an add group, and so we can keep the things separated. And this is the particle group top. And what you also can do is to change the color. Okay. We admit now, you can also see the particle color has changed from green to blue, and then you can see this part of this emitter is working now. Okay. If you want, you can turn on the modifier. When it's bent, the emitter will also stay at the right shape. Okay, now we have to make the seeds. We can do that in different ways. We can create them as clones, or we can create them as trails. And if we want to animate the seeds, it's better to do this as a clone system. Okay, we are going to create a seed. What we need is a cylinder. It's right here. Very small radius, about 2, height about 4 centimeters. Okay, maybe a little bit higher. And then we need hair. We don't need that much rotation segments, it's just we don't need that anymore later on. What we need is hair. Make it a little bit longer. Maybe it's too long. Okay, what we need is some hair, about length 363, and 6 segments. We want it to be in a polygon center. What we need then is we also need a feather object. So in here, hair underneath, and what you see, it turns into a feather, but it doesn't have the correct shape, because we want it to be nice on the top, and we also want it to be in a circle. So we need to change that, and go into the And what we do is we change it to adaptive, and then the start is about 99.9 until 100. And of course 5000 is too much, so maybe about 100. And then we go into the other settings, and we want a full circle, so we put in 360 degrees, and then it becomes to look a little bit like a shape of a seed, but we want it to be a little bit curved, and then that we can do by changing the shape of the feather. You have to go to the below section, to the curve, and then what we want is this to go up and make some extra points, and then it looks a little bit like this. The other side is the same thing. Make some extra points by clicking the control. And when you look now, you can see it gets a nice curved shape. You always have to make sure that it's just a very small object and you got a lot of them, so you don't want to make it too complicated, so it won't affect the speed of your system and your memory too much. Okay, and got a seed. Okay, but what we have to do now is we make some materials, and I got some materials over here. If you make a quick render, you see it doesn't look that much like a seed at all, so we have to change that. And the first material we need is this one, and the color, it has to be a little bit like a slightly grayish green color and a little bit beige, just a little bit off-white. You need it to be spectacular. And you also have to change the thickness. Okay. And that we'll put on the feather object. Let's make a quick render. You see it looks a lot nicer. And then we have to change the hair material also. And for the hair material, we go into the color, and we want the seed to be a little bit greenish at the below and a little bit darker at the top. But it also, yeah, it's up to you. If you want to change it, that's fine. Some spectacular. And we also need to change the thickness. Okay, so it looks a little bit strange, but we want to have a thicker part at the bottom, because that's where the seeds is going to be, and a little bit thicker at the top, because that's where the feather objects will be attached to it. Now we need to bend it a little bit, because we don't want it to be that straight. Some curling, some twists, and some wave. Now we add it to the feather object, hit render, and what you see, what happens is we got too much of them, so that's what we need to change. We need one hair and we don't need that many segments. And this is happening because it's a little bit bent and we don't want it, so go into the hair part and just this one. Okay, now what we want to do is we want to make it clonable, and so we had to convert this feather object into a real polygon object. Okay, well, if you're not really sure about what you're doing, it's always a good idea to make a copy, just in case. Hide this one, of course. Go into the hair object, and what you need to do is to go to the generate, and then you're gonna generate a spline. And when you hit now make editable, you see the hair object has turned into spline and the hair itself. And what we don't need anymore is the top part, so select those one, get it out of there, get rid of this one, and place the top below the hair, and add render, and you see you have a perfectly nice clonable object created of a hair. Go into your system, and what we need now is a generator, and select one, generator. What we need is the white one. We need to emit the top, and then place the hair object underneath the generator. Okay. Go back to the beginning and then hit play and see what happens. Okay, nothing happens. Okay, what went wrong? I'm trying to find out. Okay, what it did wrong is that just one part of the element has become a spline, but we also need to change this one. We also need to change the hair. Spline. Make editable. Now we got the top part and the other one, so we call this top. And what we also can do is we can connect them. Change this one to C, and now we have one object. We can place that beneath the generator. And what I forgot is we have to put this one on, generate geometry. I'm sorry. Let's try again. Okay, and we got a lot of particles flying around. So what we want to do now is that we want to have them stick to the top and also be in a perfect circle. So that's what we need to change now. Okay, what went wrong is we have to make sure that because we moved our seed out of the way to make it to see it better on the screen. What we did is we changed the position of the whorl of the seed, and what we need to do now is we have to make sure that the seed has the position of 0, 0, 0, 0. When not, just go into your screen and press this button and then you can change that. You have to make sure it's exactly at 0, 0, because otherwise the generator will generate the seeds, but it will thinking it's out of position. When you put it now underneath the generator and into the generator, you have to put it on object rotation random. Press those 3 buttons and then we're gonna hit play. And then we can see a perfect circle of clones. And of course what will happen, because the particles has speed, they will move on their own. So if you want to freeze that for a second, then you go to the emitter of the top, go into your particle text and press freeze. And what you need to do then is when you press the animation, whoops, and you see it's about 100, freeze particles at 100, and then make a selection when you want to unfreeze them again, and then they are going to animate. So let's say about 110. And then you see it's going to animate. And of course you can make a small render. And you can see all those nice seeds are moving out of the way. And it continues, and you can also change the variation of the speed when you go into the emitter. And when you think the scene is not long enough, you can also expand the timeline. Okay. What's next? If you like, you can always add some extra variations, of course. Modifier, you can choose something like wind. You have to make sure that it's going to affect the proper particles. So you want only the top to be effective. And then you're going to see it's going to be blown away by the wind. And also when you go into the wind, you can add some turbulence, so it's going to have a little bit of a swirl, 50%, and maybe it's too much, but it's all up to you. Okay, let's back to the beginning, heavy ground, and of course the scene looks a little bit dull, but you can change that by adding textures and some grass. I will show you some example. Okay, well, you can see it changed a little bit the scene because I made some fancy details, but that's really not necessary. It's just about a tutorial how to create a flower. But if you want to make it a whole scene, you can also do that. What I did is I added a landscape, but I hid it because it's only used to put the grass on. The grass is just a hair setting, about 2000 guides. You can make them more, you can make them less, it's up to a personal taste. Made some different kind of grassy items. You can do that with a cleaner, that's optional. And of course the only thing you have to do is to make this trunk, to change the color of this trunk, create a new material. And what we need to do is we need a gradient. Go into the gradient setting. We want it to be, we want it to be vertical. So this is going to be the top section. We want the top section just to be a little bit beige. This one we want to be a little bit green, and then it's going to be darker. Put it on. Sorry. Put it on the cleaner. And it must be on the sweet nerves. Whoops, it's going the other way around. So change angle. Oh, none is looking okay. And the other thing we need to do is we have to change the render settings. Always make sure your hair render is checked, because otherwise you won't see anything. Physical, and what we can also do is some global illumination. Okay, I'll pause for a second. Okay, took a little bit longer because there is more to calculate with all the hairs. It took about 32 seconds, and you can see all those nice details of all the seeds and different colors. And of course, if you don't like this part, you can change that by changing the color, of course, of the seeds. And it's also about the trunk. Here you can see we made this selection with making some changes on the sweetener, but also that's up to a personal taste, of course. If you don't like the color, you can also change it to a different color. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. It was very basic, but with all the tutorials we're trying to get you along the scene, and it's not always the best way to learn things about exactly recreating the scene, but it's better to make your own little tweaks and make it even more interesting by letting them blow the other way, or making a vertical blow, or just a part of the vertical is blown away. But there are all kinds of options, and you can tweak the scene with the X-particles, and that's very nice, the X-particles, that you can make so many have so many options and so many modifications to change it, that it will always be a little different. And before I forget, sometimes it will happen that when you make a preview render, it's not exactly the same as you see it in the picture viewer. But then the problem is that you have to make some adjustments. I will show you. You need to do in your system is that you have to put in a case object like this. You see it over here, and then you have to build a case, and that way your system will save some critical information and which the scene get a better render. So if you're not seeing the exactly the same picture as in the picture viewer and the picture render viewer, you can try this and maybe it's fixed.